family and friends, we take our places in the sanctuary to call to heart and mind very precious memories of a very special woman, Joyce Chesnick. And as we entered the sanctuary, we were so pleased to honor a past president of our congregation by inviting the current president of our congregation, Richard Kaplan, and past presidents before him to stand as an honor guard to appreciate and respect the woman who led our congregation from 1995 to 1997, and for many years before that as well. And so as we share this hour together, filled with sacred words and special memories, I want to invite you first to silence your cell phones and then to invite Rabbi Scott to begin with us with song and consolation.
Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol ve'hayam, rishrush shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tvilat hadam. Hachol ve'hayam, rishrush shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tvilat hadam. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. Ascend and see the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of my heart. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of my heart.
From Psalm 16, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our dearest Joyce Chesnick, and we grieve in a world that has been darkened around us. In our silence, we feel sadness, and through our tears, we feel more alone than ever before. Lost in our sorrow, may we always find the presence of dearest friends around us and loving family nearby. God, hear us this day and be with us. For Joyce's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of our heart and mind that brought us so much joy, so much happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and much more, we give our thanks to God. The psalmist asked, "What is the source of my help?" And the psalmist answered, "We lift our eyes to the mountains. Our help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. Joyce Chesnick lived a long life. The path of her life was a remarkable journey. Surely she knew the high points along the way and those that were lower too. And this beautiful poem, which has become familiar to us, is an appropriate reading and way to reflect on all the years that she came to know. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. And so we've learned through the ages, even as Job himself cried out, God has given, God has taken away, blessed be the name of God. We are an ancient people and well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, and so we have learned through the ages that a good name endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength to be found in faith. With Job we say, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one, and she will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. And yet, O God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before we acknowledge your sovereignty and your love, as we say, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. And as we do remember, there's a beautiful song that Rabbi Scott will sing for us. There are stars, so many beautiful ways to remember.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. taderet. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. We remember. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. We remember. We remember. We remember.
To find words to describe Joyce Chesnick requires some skill and art. It requires skill because not just any words will do. They have to be carefully chosen to express the person Joyce was to her family, her company of employees, her congregational family, and her community of friends. It requires art because Joyce was a beautiful person. Her beauty began on the inside and shone on the outside. Joyce was born during the Depression era. It was an era that defined people. Fortunately for Joyce, she emerged with determination to find opportunity in the future. She didn't waste any time. Her brightness and her beauty would serve her well as she married, opened doors in business, and led the way. At UT, where she studied fine arts, she met her husband, Joe, with whom she shared more than 75 years of marriage and who preceded her in death. They were married at age 19, and the ceremony was led by Rabbi Henry Barnston. Their marriage was a friendship and a partnership. At home, rearing 3 children while participating in the fashion world, and in the office where Joyce and Joe began a business dedicated to fine furnishings and decor, she was a woman ahead of her times. At home, Joyce was a marvelous mother. She had a keen eye for her children's needs. She addressed each one separately, in a way, customizing her motherhood according to their respective needs. Joan, Joe, Jr., and Robert received their mother's attention and direction. Robert was by nature more rambunctious. His mischievousness earned Joyce an award in patience and determination. Joe Jr. learned from his brother's games and earned his mother's affirmation and affections. And Joan was modeled in her mother's image to be gracious and lovely as her. While their mother balanced work and fashion, she also made time for all their activities. Never without her touch and watchful eye, they emerged to be their own people, bound by high expectations and held to standards that always reflected well on the entire Chesnick family. In the world of fashion, Joyce was without peers. She stood tall, graceful, and strong. Her hair, her clothes, jewelry, and makeup, always stylish. She came by it honestly through natural beauty and learned elegance that found a home in the fashion world. Traveling to other countries were times to encounter beauty in other settings and bring home more than souvenirs. She found styles, textures, and pieces of art that she admired. In the office, Joyce was on top of her game. The combination of expertise in fashion, her eye for design, and her business acumen made her a formidable woman in her time or any time. Even when Joe and Joyce, who split responsibilities in business, disagreed with each other, they left work at the office and returned home to be with their children. And there, Joyce preferred things just so. Her home was beautiful, her style was evident, and her closet was enormous. Every outfit and piece of jewelry told a story about an event, a designer, and a memory. Though her home was outfitted perfectly, the kitchen was a room that bore her imprint, but not necessarily her finest skills. She had her specialties for sure, including some of the best chopped liver you'll ever eat, and homemade desserts and ice cream. She also loved vegetables, which she helped her children to enjoy. They happened to love artichokes so much that when she served them a funny-looking purple vegetable called eggplant, she called it a Hawaiian artichoke, and they loved it. Joyce was masterful at leading people, beginning with her children, in the direction she believed was right for them. It didn't just make her a master salesperson, it also made her a master listener, planner, and visionary. At Congregation Beth Israel, she served in many leadership roles, including president of the Board of Trustees from 1995 to 1997. There were years of enormous activity when, with Rabbi Karf, she led the design and development of Beth Israel's Memorial Gardens and Proler Chapel, with vision, determination, and leadership. I remember well the pride with which she embraced the sacred work to create a sacred space to bring our loved ones to their final resting places on earth. With nationally known architect Daniel Solomon, she carried the project to completion. With gratitude and respect, we accompanied Joyce to her final resting place earlier today, and with all the grace and meaning that she invested in that place for us, and now for her. Joyce's presence in the room was always stunning. She led with passion and purpose. She didn't suffer fools, but she was kind to everyone. At work, she was kind to every employee and cared about their well-being. At Temple here, she loved the staff and appreciated the care that everyone extended to her. She earned it, but it was also their pleasure to treat a charming Southern woman to every courtesy and kindness she deserved. On Joyce and Joe's 75th wedding anniversary, Joyce wasn't well enough to come to Temple for a blessing next to her dear Joe. But Joe came to Temple and stood next to me here on the bema. I acknowledged their love and friendship, the journey they shared and the love they still knew. The congregation applauded the moment for his courage to come alone and for the partnership that deserved God's blessing. No doubt Joe brought home the blessing to his bride, and no doubt kissed her kindly and told her that he loved her. Their love and friendship was observed by their children. It was noted by them recently as a cherished memory, an image they will hold dear. Joyce led by example. She favored strength over weakness and beauty and brains over anything plain or simple-minded. And as I recall, she was masterful at helping others see what she saw and brought them along to complete that vision. Generally, she was right, and in the end, everyone was better for what she created, not alone, but with personal, physical, and emotional support she built into the entire plan. It's why when the Proler Chapel and extensive modifications to the cemetery on Antoine were voted by the congregation at an annual meeting, there was only one dissenting vote. One of Joyce's proudest moments was a day when Joe Jr. became president of Beth Israel II. Like her, he led with persistence and wisdom, with a firm hand and vision. It was a privilege to have been an associate rabbi and observe Joyce in her role as president, and to be the senior rabbi and work side by side with Joe in his years as president. But the greatest joy was felt by Joe himself when he picked up his mother at her home in the car, and they arrived together at meetings of the past presidents of Beth Israel. Sitting next to each other, it was a picture-perfect moment, filled with the sum of her highest expectations of herself and her family. Joyce lived long enough to have meaningful relationships with 4 senior rabbis of Beth Israel, beginning with Rabbi Barnston, then Rabbi Schachtel, Rabbi Karf, and with me. It was our privilege, too, but she was also very mindful of other clergy who served here, including Rabbi Scott, with whom she had a fine relationship. I think it's fair to say that Joyce saw in Rabbi Scott a woman leader who makes a difference and who can find her place at the head of the table too. Her grandchildren were special blessings in her life. Robbie, Julia, Jeff and Shoshana, Mark and Stacy, Bradley and Amy, Jill and Robert. For them, she was a role model on many levels. Her stature and perseverance led them to follow her words and her ways. Jill and her grandmother shared an interest in all things fine and beautiful. Her grandmother's confidence rests in her heart too, which she brings into her own home and family. Her grandsons will share their words today, but they didn't miss their grandmother's balance of toughness and kindness either. She knew just when to use which skill to accomplish at work or at home what was needed. Her extra blessings were her 8 great-grandchildren, Leah, Lewis, Ryder, Andrew, Daniel, Helen, Max, and Addison. The blessing of a long life is another generation to love and to cherish. Joyce lived a remarkable life, but she did feel profound sadness on the death of her dear brother, Jerry Bales, an ensign in the war. In his eulogy, Rabbi Schachtel described Jerry as a handsome and bright young man whose talents were lost in service to our country. Lifted up and remembered with honor, it was nevertheless a great sadness she carried with her. In honor of his life of service, Joyce's vision was to create the Ensign Jerry Bales Award for a student in our religious school program who exemplified her brother's attributes and courage. Given for years to young students and then to confirmation students, it was her incredible joy to grant the award for all the right reasons 1 year to her own granddaughter, Jill. Today, the award continues to be given by Joe with special words about his mother and his uncle. And Joyce's daughters-in-law, Karen and Yvonne, and her son-in-law, Stephen, adored her too. She welcomed them as her own, which also meant that she didn't hesitate to offer her strong opinion about a home to buy and how to decorate it as well. Stephen shared a funny story I must share with you that he said quite seriously that she couldn't come to his home any longer because every time she commented on something that needed redecorating, it cost him a fortune. But as you might know, her opinion was best for him in the long run too, and he, like her grandchildren in their homes, learned to agree. And well, she was right. Last weekend, Joyce had her lunch on schedule and then lay down to rest. And she died in her sleep. After years of tender, loving care in her home, Joyce, who was dear, beloved, beautiful, and bright, stunning and masterful in every step she took, was at peace. True, we will not hear her voice again, but we will always treasure her words to us. We will not see such beauty again, but we will find it in everything that bears exquisite grace and charm. We are grateful today for the long life she lived and the way she lived each day. God, thank you for the gift of the life of Joyce Chesnick and for the difference she made in all the places she shared time with us and those who were touched by her life. Zichronah livracha. May her memory be a blessing to us now and always. Amen. There are so many ways to remember Joyce today. It's important to remember the personal memories that her family bears. And so it's a privilege first to call on her grandson, Mark, to share his words.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Dinnerstein, and today we're gathered to celebrate the life of a remarkable woman, my grandmother, Joyce Chesnick. Today I'd like to share with you what it means to be Joyce's grandson. Joyce touched the lives of many in so many ways across decades. living what I can only describe as an extremely accomplished life. A life so impactful that I can only hope to have the same impression on the world as Joyce, or as her 6 grandchildren refer to her as, our granny. To be Joyce's grandchild means that you were in awe of her vast achievements. And it was just some of these accomplishments that made such an enormous impact on my life. And whether she knew it or not, these events shaped Joyce's perspective that we have all learned so much from. To start, let's recognize her bravery. As a 19-year-old newlywed, she watched her husband board a Navy cruiser to join the various campaigns of World War II. For months at a time, she diligently awaited Joe's return. Steadfast in belief, this war was simply a detour for what was to become a marriage of more than 75 years. So let's recognize the 2 types of bravery. First, traveling to strange cities as a woman on her own, not knowing what the future would bring. And the second type of bravery, to be married for more than 75 years. And perhaps going through the stresses of the unknown, life and death situations, and devoting themselves to finding a way to come back together is what helped make theirs a marriage for the record books. As my wife and I enter our 11th year of marriage, Joyce and Joe's story is one to envy and model our lives. In fact, our son's middle name is Jay, which is a tribute to Joyce and Joe. Next, we have to discuss her career. I think most of us can agree that raising 3 children is more than a full-time job. But Joyce's determination led her down 2 paths: raising children and having quite a prolific resume. When I think about her various careers, spanning 5 decades, I clearly see a drive, can-do attitude, and confidence to seek new challenges, which certainly inspired me as a young man trying to make sense of my own decisions and forge my career path. Joyce was as intelligent as she was beautiful. And as she transitioned from modeling women's fashion to partnering with my grandfather Joe at their furniture and interior design business, to serving as president of Temple Beth Israel, Joyce achieved success with each opportunity. I took particular interest in the Beth Israel Cemetery Sanctuary project, which Joyce led. And what I remember most is how Granny collaborated with the various architects, designers, and project managers. She would often discuss her role with me, how she respected her team members' expertise, and strived to make it all work. With each person's contributions recognized and incorporated, Joyce's efforts yielded a beautiful place of reflection and worship. Even today, more than 25 years later, the sanctuary looks modern and fresh. And of course, I'm positive she would only rest peacefully in a place that she designed herself. When I look back, I see my grandmother not placing limitations and expecting the best of herself, leading with confidence and respect for her collaborators. I'm so thankful to her for having taken the time to give me her perspective, and I carry these lessons into my own career. As someone who leads dozens of people in my own company, I learned from Granny that it takes patience, humility, and understanding to be a true leader. And finally, I'd like to touch on her skill of guidance. Throughout my life, I have relied on her ability to listen and guide, and she was in on some of my biggest decisions. Joyce's approval wasn't mandatory, but I can't imagine making some of those decisions without her. Some of my most vivid memories were of our frequent late-night phone calls when I was attending college in New Orleans. Joyce was a bit of a night owl, and that worked really well for our relationship. because we would often speak into the late evenings, sometimes well past midnight. She would always make time, no matter what. I would share the latest in my college life, what classes I liked, telling her about my exploration of all that New Orleans had to offer, and she would coach me through questions and pending decisions, especially on which girls I should be dating. Later into my 20s, one such decision, which I struggled with for many months, was moving to Los Angeles. Granny not only encouraged me, but shared some of her experiences, which helped clear a path for me to take the biggest chance of my life to that point. And it's been almost 20 years since I moved to California. The adventure continues with so much support from my granny. I know I speak for all the grandchildren when I say we are lucky to have such an influential, strong, and supportive woman as Joyce Chesnick in our lives. We will always cherish our memories with her and remember her many accomplishments, especially being our beloved grandmother.
And I'd like to invite her grandson Bradley to share his words.
Good afternoon. My name is Bradley Chesnick, and I am one of Joyce's 6 grandchildren. And I want to start off by saying that it takes guts for a 46-year-old man to stand here today and refer to his grandmother as Gugu. Now, the name Gugu also went over really well when I went to work for her as a grown-up, and I quickly had to pivot to Joyce, or the proverbial, "Hey you." Alas, going back to my early childhood, the name Gugu was deemed acceptable, as was calling my grandfather Papi Goo. Now, please see the archives from my speech at my grandfather's funeral 2 years ago for how Papi Goo was forced on me as my 3-year-old concoction, Potty Jew, was frowned upon. Now, I would assume that most young children have positive memories of spending time with their grandmother. Me? Not so much, but let me explain. I spent enough time with my grandmother as a kid to know that she enjoyed a glass of wine or 2 at dinner, parties, or just lounging around her home in a robe. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old when she and I were out shopping together, and I remember riding in the front seat when she asked me to pick up a bottle of wine on the floorboard and hand it to her while she was driving. She then proceeded to unscrew the wine bottle, and she loved an inexpensive Chardonnay, take a few sips, and hand the bottle back to me to place on the floor. Now, having recently been educated at school and seen public service announcements on TV about the perils of driving under the influence, I immediately went home and told my parents, "Mom, Dad, Gugu drinks and drives." All right, well, after a quick inquiry with Joyce, my mom educated me on what Perrier bottled water was. True story. So now we're going to fast forward to when I was in the 4th grade, and Gugu drove me home. As we turned on my street, I heard a dreadful crunch. She ran over and killed a squirrel. Now, I was a pretty sensitive boy at the time and loved all things animal, so I was pretty devastated. I quickly fashioned a coffin from a shoebox and added a Star of David made from masking tape onto the lid. My father and I retrieved the recently departed and gave Mr. Squirrel Bergstein a proper Jewish burial. So years later at my bar mitzvah, Joyce was the Board of Trustees member who bestowed a few words from the temple upon me at the Friday night Shabbat service. And she concluded her remarks with, "And I'm sorry I ran over the only Jewish squirrel in Memorial." In 2005, I moved back to Houston from New York, having spent the past few years working for Ethan Allen Corporate, learning the furniture business. For some reason, my family felt that a 23-year-old kid from Texas could benefit from managing a store on Queens Boulevard, literally blocks away from where the set of McDowell's Restaurant, home of the Big Mick, stood from the 1980s classic film Coming to America. I tried to implement many things I experienced at corporate, but was wholly rejected when it came to merchandising, which had been Joyce's responsibility since our first Ethan Allen store opened in 1968. It was an uphill battle to convince her that every wall in the store doesn't need to have a different wallpaper. I remember working late nights with Joyce because she didn't show up for work until 3 p.m. She was a force to be reckoned with. At 80 years old, she insisted on moving heavy furniture around the showroom by herself. Joyce loved her work, which kept her young at heart and mind. She was passionate, energetic, detail-oriented, opinionated, and strived for perfection in order to best position the business for success. Now, how many people truly get to partner with their 80-year-old grandmother in day-to-day business? Even though we didn't see eye to eye on every business-related decision, there was an immense level of mutual respect between us. I would like to think that Joyce saw some of her skills, personality, and strengths in me, and now I can see them too, including the stubbornness. Joyce's influence over Ethan Allen wasn't just felt locally. She was a long-term member of the Ethan Allen Chairman's Advisory Council, made up of independent retailers from around the country. In the early 1990s, Ethan Allen was looking to update the brand in a more modern manner, which included changing exterior store facades. Joyce disagreed with the proposed renderings, saying that it looked like a funeral home. No offense to the good people at Houston Jewish Funerals. Joyce worked with the local architect to develop a design for the store exteriors that Ethan Allen was so enamored with that they implemented the new look nationwide. Ethan Allen's chairman still tells this story each year at our international convention as an example of great entrepreneurial thinking on the behalf of their independent retailers. As it has been said, and will be said by many, Joyce's hard work, love, and dedication to the temple throughout her life will benefit Congregation Beth Israel for generations to come. She served as a role model and inspired many future leaders of the temple to get involved by donating their time and expertise. My sister Jill saw at a young age Joyce's impact on the temple community, especially as a strong female leader. Jill was inspired, and truthfully, the last hope of Joyce's grandchildren to win the Ensign Jerry Bells Award, which Rabbi Lyons said is presented each year to an outstanding student from Beth Israel's confirmation class and created in Joyce's brother's honor. Jill, always the overachiever and keen on besting her brother, was the 1996 Ensign Jerry Bells Award winner and enjoyed a very special evening where she received the award from her grandmother. My father, Joe, witnessed his mother's lay leadership impression on the temple, and he too followed in her footsteps in service to the temple as president of the Board of Trustees, 13 years after his mother held the same position. I have also been inspired by Joyce and am currently finishing up my 6-year term serving on the Board of Trustees. I feel fortunate to have had Joyce, Gugu, in my life for the past 46 years and will be forever grateful for the memories of time spent with her as family and in business. The lessons learned from her are priceless and timeless, and ones that I will most certainly be passing along to my children, Max and Addison, one day. Gugu, we love you and miss you. Thank you.
and it's a privilege to invite her son, Joe, to share his words.
Mark and Bradley, wonderful job. Very, very, very proud of both of you. First, I want to express on behalf of our family for all of you that are joining us today, and also those of you who are joining us via our live streaming. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I know my mother would be just thrilled. Special thank you also to the past presidents who took their time today to be here and form this wonderful honor that you bestowed on my mother this afternoon. That was, she would just be thrilled. As you know, she was one for proper etiquette and protocol, and while we were waiting to come into the sanctuary, the rabbi mentioned, don't worry, it's no flags or trumpets. I said, well, probably she would like flags and trumpets. Earlier this week, we met with Rabbi Lyon, and he mentioned the senior rabbis whose portraits hang on the wall here in the entry, and the relationship she had with them, with each one of them, very meaningful relationships. What he really didn't talk about, though, too much was his relationship with her. And as we were meeting at my sister's home on Tuesday afternoon, and we were taking turns talking about my mother, and when we got to his chair, he would talk about an experience with my mother. We'd go around again, he would talk about another experience. So instead of necessarily leading the conversation, he was just like a member of her own family. And in a way, Rabbi, it was almost like she was your mother. And so we enjoyed that time with you, and it was very natural, very personal, and we appreciate it. Our mother enjoyed growing up in the Montrose area, where she was known as the neighborhood tomboy and developed her love for animals. I imagine experiencing the 10-year Great Depression, especially during her early teenage years, contributed to her inner strength, determination, and self-confidence. Dad literally received his Navy commission the day before he and Mom married. After a short honeymoon, he left to his Pacific assignment. Occasionally, his ship would return to a U.S. port for repairs or new equipment. Mom was allowed to, without much warning, travel to that particular city and meet him for the week or two that the ship would be in port. On one particular summer stay in New York, they were assigned the Piccadilly Hotel. This was fortunate in that the only Navy hotel that was actually air-conditioned at the time. Problem was, there was a strict policy that required all officers to rotate hotels for security purposes, and she was determined not to leave. Well, guess who made an appointment with the ship's commanding officer to successfully negotiate and state her position of why she should remain as a Piccadilly? I asked her, I said, well, how did Dad ever allow you to even think about going to his commanding officer? Her reply, I never told him. Mom was quite creative and innovative. As an example, I have always liked my things in personal spaces neat, clean, and organized. My side of the bathroom, my car, my closet, my office, my locker, well, you get the picture. And it was certainly a trait I inherited from my mother. One day, some years ago, Mom walked into my office, looked around, and chuckled. She said, you were not always this way. Seems as a 10-pound newborn, I never stopped eating. And in those days, you gave an infant all they could handle at each meal. Some of you may recall that the pony who used to come around, you would take your baby pictures on top of this pony. Well, I was bigger than the horse. The issue was, at mealtime, I was having way too much fun stuffing myself along with throwing food everywhere and then spitting up all over her and the kitchen floor, creating quite the mess, which she was not fond of. This was her solution. Purchase one of the first plastic high chairs, place me outside strapped in, put all the food I could throw and eat on the tray, stand back, and let me just go at it all by myself. When finished, the cleanup phase consisted of being washed down with the garden hose, both me and the chair. And I told her, I said, "Mom, that didn't seem very nice." Her reply, "Certainly worked for me, combination of feeding and bathing all in one step." Despite what may have seemed like a CPS violation, Mom was a wonderful mother. During her working years as a model, we never missed a scout meeting, judo lesson, Little League practice. She managed to do it all. And we never lacked for her love and, yes, discipline when required. Yeah. In business, Mom was well respected and a remarkable merchant and mentor. In addition, she could be very tough when necessary to overcome what was still a male-dominated industry some years ago. She maintained a large binder reflecting the various agreements with each vendor. I recall my brother Robert one summer, I think during college, was assigned to receive and unpack incoming accessory orders. One day he discovered some damaged items, and according to the binder, the vendor was required to replace at no charge. Upon calling what was a seasoned customer service representative at this particular company, somewhat sensed his inexperience and was pushing back on the agreement. Well, my mother happened to be walking by and was listening to the conversation, took the phone, and promptly resolved the issue. If not for this setting, I might use a different term, but let's just say I'm sure he had a hard time psychologically sitting for the next week or two. After a few weeks, Mom asked Robert if he had experienced any additional issues, because she hadn't really heard from him. He replied, "Yes, it still happens, but now I've learned how to resolve it myself. I just say, look, you can deal with me now or my mother later. And believe me, you don't want to go down that path. It's not pretty." I would be amiss if I did not mention the large circle of friends my parents enjoyed for so many years. Countless parties, tennis, traveling, football games, they did it all like one big family. As kids and even adults, we never referred to them as Mr. and Mrs., but always as Aunt and Uncle. Aunt Joyce and Uncle Joe were loved by all of our friends. I want to mention one other thing. My parents combined lived for 194 years, long time. And Steve is shaking his head. But what I want to say is that part of the reason that they had such a long, fulfilling life was because of Steve and the care that he provided both of them. Probably took off a few years of your life expectancy, Steve, but you did a wonderful job, always pointed them to the right specialist, and we're so appreciative taking care of us but especially them. Thank you. I'd like to close quoting one paragraph from a letter I found in a Beth Israel scrapbook that I think describes our mother's character. And I quote, "I quickly learned that you are a model of devotion to Beth Israel. Since then, you impress me at every turn with your willingness to pursue excellence. Further, you did it with such style and grace. Who wrote that? A young associate rabbi on April 30th, 1997. Thank you.
The years have been full. 98 years of life, and many ways she touched us will never be forgotten. We're so grateful to everybody for their memories and the conversations that will continue. As we take a moment to reflect on our own memories, let's listen to Rabbi Scott as she leads us in a memorable and familiar song about peace that fills our hearts and our homes this day.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
We'll conclude our time together as we invite you to join us in reciting the words of Kaddish in her honor and her memory. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrachu te v'yamlich malchute, v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'galav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam v'lo me'almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'gudasha brichu, le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, dameram v'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the one who causes peace to reign in the high heavens cause peace to reign upon this family, the circle of friends, this congregation, and all who were touched by Joyce's life of deeds, of beauty, and grace. Amen. At this time, I would like to invite all who are here to join us in a moment for a meal of condolence in the social hall behind the sanctuary. Now I'd like to ask our honor guard of past presidents to take their place once more so that Rabbi Scott and I may lead the family from the sanctuary first and to pass between you as a way once more of recognizing the community of leaders who have led so beautifully our historic and beloved congregation. Thank you all. This concludes our service.